Where were you born?
I was born about 5 miles north of Guttenberg on a farm which is recently known as the Patterson Farm on the Great River Road.
And were you educated here in Guttenberg then?
I went to St. Mary's for 7 years and went to country school at Buck Creek, 8th grade, to help the folks on the farm.
So you started your education at St. Mary's, or did you start your education at country school?
No. It was St. Mary's.
Okay, so country school was up in Buck Creek. Can you describe that experience, going from St. Mary's, which was a bigger school, to country school?
Yes. It was actually kind of comical. We had 8 grades in one room with one teacher, and going to St. Mary's for 7 years prior to that, I feel I was so far advanced over the country school children that it was kind of a wasted year as far as I was concerned.
And what do you want to share what the reason was that you had to do that? Just, you said help out on the farm was the main thing?
Yes, the country school was just down over the hill from our farm.
Uh-huh.
So I was able to help with the chores in the morning and still get to school on time. And
Because I'm assuming you probably walked to St. Mary's.
to St. Mary's?
Yeah.
No.
No.
That'd be 5 miles.
Okay.
I stayed with my grandparents here in
Okay.
town, them first 7 years. We did ride a horse and buggy the first fall of my first grade. My brother was 7 years older than I am, so he was allowed to drive a horse, I wasn't. And we stabled the horse in a stable here close to school. But then when it got cold, that was the end of that.
Were there several kids that got to town that way?
No,
No.
no,
So the
Back-
stable wasn't full of horses?
no,
Yeah, okay.
just ours.
Okay.
There was no school buses in those days, of course.
Okay.
The Elsingers, who lived down on, up behind the hill up on toward Garber, they had a van which bused their children to school every day, and then they picked up Alphonse Miller's 2 children. Other than that, there was no
No public
transportation
And what year?
available.
What year would this have been?
Okay, let's see, 36, 40, 42. Well, I would have started my first grade probably in 42,
Okay.
so we're talking about the 40s.
Okay. Okay. And what year were you born?
1936.
Okay, 1936. And
August,
that makes you how old?
right now 83.
Okay.
August 29th, 1936, during the Great Drought.
You probably don't remember that experience, but I would imagine that you probably did live through some of the after effects.
I remember the folks talking about herding the cattle down on the bottoms. This is before the lock and dam system, where there was a lot of grassy areas, islands, stuff, that it was so dry that year they herded the cattle down to the Mississippi to eat.
So, on an average day, what did you kids do for entertainment when you were growing up?
Pretty well the opposite of what it is today. We had our chores to do when I was, in the first, second grade. It was a matter of gathering up the eggs, and then they'd give me a real easy cow to milk. And then as you got older, things got a little harder, where you started milking several cows instead of one or two easy ones. There was always the chores back then. It was all hand harvested. So it was loose hay up in the hay mow. You had to tear that loose and feed the cows twice a day in the winter, and feed the hogs and the chickens, and there was always something to do. You didn't have much time to think about getting in trouble. If you did, beware.
And it looks like here you talked about a Christmas parade.
Yes, I remember I had a little Shetland pony, and Jimmy Everhart had a pony who lived down over the hill from our farm. And I remember he and I joining the Christmas parade, which went all the way down Front Street, ended up at the municipal building. And Dean Lanfear was the master of ceremonies for WMT radio. So Santa Claus was at the municipal building along with Mr. Lanfear. You got to talk Santa Claus, and Mr. Lanfear interviewed many people that went over the air. Pretty good crowd.
Oh, I bet.
Back in that era, if you came to Guttenberg on a Saturday night, there were times you had to park down on the 3rd Street, well, where the Catholic Church is, because Front Street, which we called Front Street, now River Drive, and 2nd Street, which was where Moxie's was, not Moxie's,
Agnes's?
Agnes's tap. We called that 2nd Street. Both of those were bumper to bumper. Back then, the men would come to town and go to the tavern. The women would do the weekly grocery shopping. A few of them would join their men at the tavern. Most of them would sit out in the car and watch the pedestrians walk by. Kids were playing out in the park. Princess Theater was in operation. Anyway, there was movies 7 days a week, usually 2 a night. And I can remember where people were lined up down to Kimpton Lake Hardware from the theater, waiting to buy tickets to get in. At the same time, Lakeside Ballroom, you couldn't find a parking spot in the whole parking area, which is now mobile homes. They had some very popular bands booked back in that era, usually the first one after Lent, Easter. They had Guy Lombardo, Lawrence Welk, Tommy Dorsey, the Everly Brothers, to name a few. The 1 year before the flood walls was put in, they had planks up to the front door of Lakeside for Lawrence Welk. The water was right underneath the floor, but didn't damage the floor. But the people actually had to walk the plank to get into Lakeside that night.
Yeah.
Back when I was growing up here, we had Pioneer Wood Products. We had Iowa Produce, which packed eggs and harvested turkeys and chickens.
And the egg factory, is that what you're referring to?
Iowa Produce, yes. That was my first job, away from the farm.
I think you should put in there that you went to the Navy for
Yeah, when were you in the Navy?
Navy.
I went in the Navy in February of 1974.
Oh, wait a minute, 54.
I mean 54. 74.
So, did you ever graduate from high school?
No.
You did not. You went to country school, and then that was probably the end of your education.
No, I started
Yes.
my freshman year at St. Mary's. And in November, about this time of year, it was cold and snowy, and my mom's out picking corn by hand. And I thought, here I sit in a nice warm classroom, she's out freezing in her hands. I talked to them and let me quit school because I was going to farm the rest of my life. So I quit in November of 52.
Probably.
Then, on my 16th birthday, we came home from church on a Sunday and I saw smoke. When we got on top of the hill, our house was on fire. And by that night, there was nothing left but a hole in the ground, which ended the farming for my folks and the job of farming for me.
That had to be I can't even imagine. So that was your 16th birthday and you guys were coming home from church.
Yes.
You saw smoke. So, you know, in those days, what happened? I mean, did neighbors come to help or, you know, obviously how many people were in your family?
Well, at that time, there was only my mother, my father, and myself.
So you guys had to find some place to live quick and,
Well, we had a summer kitchen probably about 30 feet from the house, where the house stood. And there was a stove in there and we set up beds in there and we stayed there until we got rid of the cattle and everything. And somebody had to be there every day to take care of the livestock.
until you sold all the livestock.
Yeah, we had our closing out sale. I think it was the day before Thanksgiving. Terrible day.
What was so that was in August when the fire, and
Yes.
then you lived in that little house until Thanksgiving, and you had the day before Thanksgiving, you said?
We sold out.
You had your selling
We had
out
our
sale.
closing out
Yeah.
sale.
Snowy or what?
That little house you referred to, back in that era, a lot of the farmers had a summer kitchen, they called it, where they did the washing. And they had a stove out there where the women did the baking. And remember back in those days, they didn't have automatic washers. It was the old tub
Ringer.
with a engine and running it with a belt.
Mm-hmm. Old ringer, is that what it was?
Pardon?
An old ringer washer?
Yes. Going back to your question about high school, or about, high school diploma. I did take the USAFI course aboard ship, and I got the equivalent of my high school diploma in 3 hours. You took the test, whatever you failed, you had to take correspondence. Unfortunately, I passed them all, so I didn't have to take correspondence.
Okay, where did you meet your wife? Lakeside?
Right where you met your husband.
Let me think. Yeah? I
Yeah?
think it probably was, yeah.
Well, the marriages started
Yeah.
up there.
Okay, so, and then what did you do by trade? I mean, once you graduated from high school, got out of the service.
I spent the majority of my adult life in the insurance business. I started out as an adjuster and ended up as an agent.
Okay, do you have any children?
4,
All boys, all girls?
3 girls, 1 boy.
What did you want to say about the Milwaukee Railroad?
Oh, back in the early years of grade school, the Milwaukee Road ran through here, and we had a depot because passenger trains came through here. So the people that wanted to go to Minneapolis or whatever would come to the depot, buy their tickets, and just like the Union Station, they had chairs or benches, sitting there waiting for the train. And back then, the communication was a pole all along the tracks by the depot with two fingers out, and there's a string between these two fingers with the orders for the conductor. So as the train went past, he'd reach out and grab that. I saw several passenger trains go through here full of army men. This was kind of right at the end of World War II, which was a great day of celebration. The day it ended, I remember the church bells ringing and clanging and whistles blowing.
In what year, how old were you at that time?
Oh, I'd have been about 6, 7, 5, 6 in that area.
That had to be exciting.
Well, let's see, the war ended, what, in 44?
5?
42.
Yeah, born in 36. So, yeah, I've been 7, 8 years old.
Okay, so this string on the train, how do you mean that was communication? Okay, when the string was hanging there, what did that mean?
Well, back then they didn't have the modern communication we got to do with radios and all that. So the orders to the conductor was kind of in charge back in those days. The engineer and the conductor worked together. And he always was in the caboose, the last car of the train. This pole sat along the tracks by the depot. And it had like two fingers out, and there was a string in between that had the message.
Oh, okay.
So as he went by, all he had to do was stick his hand out and grab that message and rip it, break the strings.
Okay, I thought it was some kind of special railroad code.
Yeah.
Okay,
No.
so the conductor was in the caboose. Who was the guy running the train?
The engineer.
Okay, engineer. Okay.
Then, back then, remember, with steam engines, not diesels. By the depot, they had a big water tower. So usually, when they stopped there at the depot, they'd pull up that water tower, and while the passengers were loading, probably, they'd fill up the reservoir for that steam engine. And you'd see the cloud of smoke as they took off.
Okay, now you've got something here about Mr. McGuire, his janitorial duties, Dorweiler.
No, that was my uncle.
Okay, so he was your uncle.
He was a janitor at St. Mary's here. With a shovel, snow shovel, he cleaned the snow off of 3 sides of that block. The back side, of course, is alley. So he did this north side, the east side, and the south side, besides the sidewalks between the school, the church, and the priest's house. All by hand, with a shovel. Besides, he had to stoker the furnace. Back then it was coal. He rang the church bells at noon and at 6 o'clock. And in his spare time, he had an old Chevrolet with an open back, which was the trunk. In his spare time, he'd haul the mail from the depot up to the post office, which was up on Front Street next to the theater back then, by Moxie's today. And then in his spare time, after that, he was also the grave digger out at our 2 cemeteries. And of course, there was no backhoes or any machines. So how did Ben dig the graves in the middle of the wintertime? He would take ties and wood, and he'd lay it out over the grave site, start it on fire, go home for the night, come back the next morning, take what's sawed off, and then get the pick and shovel out and finish digging the grave. On his day of his funeral, Corny Ticky said to me, when Ben Dorvaller was the grave digger, we never waited for a grave. But we have to put him out in the crypt because they can't get the grave dug in this through the frost with the modern machines. That's my story.
How old was he when he died?
Why, do you remember?
No, I don't.
I bet he lived to be a ripe old age.
Yes,
Somebody
he
that
did.
worked that hard.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
I'd say he was probably close to 80.
Well, that's not that old
Well,
anymore. No.
yes, it was for that era.
Mm.
What was
Remember back when I was a youngster, life expectancy was like 62 or something. But through modern medicine, it's been extended quite a few years.